Okay. So today is the 13th of Shvat. Is the yard site of one of the Rebbitzins, Rebbitzin Shterna Sarah. That's why there's such a common Chabad name, Shterna Sarah. And she was the mother of the previous Rebbe, the Rebbitzin of the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, Rebbe Rashab. And she's actually, her place of burial is right opposite the Ohel, near our Rebbitzin and near her mother, Rebbitzin Chamadina. So I'm going to give this out. You can read it, pass it on to someone else. A little bit about the life of Rebbitzin Shterna Sarah. I have more copies. Is there someone here that didn't get a copy of the Mamar yesterday? Yeah. So the Mamar began with the question, why does it say, Veata Tetzave? You should command, whereas in the whole Torah, it always says, command the Bnei Yisrael. It doesn't say you. In fact, when it says you, it seems to imply as if Moshe is the one that's giving the command, but he's not. It's Hashem's commandment. Moshe is only the messenger to give it over. And the answer is that the word Tetzave has a deeper meaning. Not only does Moshe Rabbeinu give over a command, but Tetzave also comes in Aramaic. The root of the word is Tzav Tzavachibur, which means connection. Moshe Rabbeinu connects us to Hashem, to Or Ein Sof. And that's what the pasuk means. Ve'ata tetzave as Bnei Yisrael, and you, that's the function of Moshe Rabbeinu. You're there to connect the Bnei Yisrael with Hashem. There was another question. Why does it say that Moshe should tell the Yidden to bring the olive oil to him? He's not lighting the menorah. Aaron is lighting the menorah. So why does it say they should bring olive oil to Moshe? So in continuation to this interpretation, that Moshe connects us to Or Ein Sof, he explains the pasuk to mean that when Moshe provides us with this spiritual connection to Hashem, by doing that, it appears as if he's giving something to us, but as a result of that, we're giving something to him. That as a result of that, Moshe Rabbeinu's spiritual level becomes upgraded and enhanced. And that's what it means. They should bring olive oil to you. The olive oil represents that spiritual level that sort of is added to Moshe through him being mashpia to the Yidden. And he uses the analogy of the head and the feet, just like in the human body. The head is the mashpia. The head guides the body, and the head gives direction to the body. The head makes the decision where the body should go and the feet should go. So it appears as if the head is the one that gives and the body is the one that takes. But in a different way is the feet. But in a different way, the feet are actually providing something for the head. Because the head, with all its understanding, there's certain places it can't get to without the feet. Because the head itself can't walk. So the feet are actually contributing to the head. The same as with Yidden and Moshe. Moshe is the head, and we're all the rest of the body and the feet. And Moshe gives us, but we also give him. And that's what it means, bring the olive oil to Moshe. It's talking about what we contribute to Moshe. What is it exactly? Didn't explain yet, but that's what he's going to explain in the Mamar. So in the Mamar, we're on page 16. I'm so sorry. I'm looking at some other numbers. Page 35, 34. Well, the Vayir is in order to explain this, Magdim B'HaMaimer. Remember we said that this Mamar is based on, and it's elaborating on a Mamar of the previous Rebbe. that the previous Rebbe said, Tov Reish Pei Zayin, 1927, and that was also Purim Cotton, that was the date. And this mimer was also Purim Cotton. And the Rebbe in this mimer is elaborating and explaining difficulties in that mimer. So the Rebbe says in that mimer of the previous Rebbe, he gives this preface. Shemesh Rabbeinu Nikra Raya Mehemna. That Moshe Rabbeinu is referred to as Raya Mehemna, which means it's Aramaic, and it means the faithful shepherd. But he's going to explain now there are two interpretations to that. Hannah, did you get the mimer?
I did not.
No? Okay. We'd like to present you with a mimer.
Thank you. What's it called? Discussing.
Okay. So if you look, when I guess that's what I was saying, 16, look at page 16, and you'll see something interesting. What you're looking at on page 16 is the Zohar. It's part of the Zohar. And in the Zohar, there's a page on the left side, on the right side of the page is Aramaic. That's the original Zohar. On the left side of the page is a translation in Hebrew. So this is a Zohar that was printed in the original Zohar. There is no Hebrew, it's all Aramaic. But not that long ago, someone printed a Zohar, so it should be easier to follow with the Hebrew translation. So just look at the right side. On top of the page, it says Raya Mehemna as a title. What does that mean? It means that this piece of the Zohar was actually written by Moshe Rabbeinu. The Zohar is from Shmuel Bar Yochai, but he had manuscripts which were written by Moshe Rabbeinu, and they were passed down from generation to generation, and he incorporated those manuscripts in the Zohar. So that's why on top he writes Raya Mehemna. Really, he should have written Moshe Rabbeinu, but he writes Raya Mehemna because that itself teaches us something, that Moshe Rabbeinu's title is Raya Mehemna. What's Raya Mehemna? So look at the Hebrew, how they translated Roya Haneman, the faithful shepherd. So generally speaking, a shepherd is always identified with being loyal, dedicated, devoted, because a shepherd loves the sheep and he protects them from wolves and other kind of dangers. So when you talk about someone who is a leader with dedication and love and care, that's Moshe Rabbeinu. In fact, it says in the Medrash that Moshe Rabbeinu was first a shepherd of the sheep that belonged to Yisro. And when he was with the sheep, he divided them in a way that the older sheep need a different kind of grass because they're older, it's harder for them to chew. And the younger sheep need a different kind of grass. And the middle sheep need a different kind of grass. He led each one to grass which was suitable for them. That's one story. The other story is the famous story with Moshe at the burning bush. How did Moshe Rabbeinu come to the burning bush in the first place? So it says in the Medrash that as he was leading the sheep, pasturing them, he was shepherding them. One of the little lamb ran away, and Moshe Rabbeinu ran after that little lamb. And finally, he caught the little lamb, and that's when he saw the burning bush. And Hashem also said, look, there's a whole flock of sheep, but one little lamb ran away. So Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say, okay, so it ran away, but I have a whole flock, and they're all here, hundreds of thousands of sheep. He ran after that one. He wouldn't let one little sheep run away. And Hashem said, being that you're such a faithful shepherd for the sheep, Begashmi, so you're the suitable person to be the shepherd of my children. I once heard another part of that Medrash, which up until that time I never heard, that Moshe Rabbeinu caught this little sheep, this little lamb, that he finally found some water somewhere and was drinking the water. And Moshe Rabbeinu picked up the little lamb and he said, I thought that you're being wild and rebellious, but now I see you're only thirsty, that's all. So this is sort of a metaphor that when a Yid runs away from the flock, it looks like they're being wild, it looks like they're being rebellious, but in reality, they're just thirsty. And if you feed them and you give them whatever they need to quench their thirst and satisfy their hunger, then they'll come back. So Moshe Rabbeinu is a faithful shepherd. That's the simple translation of the words, but there's a deeper translation. And that is, the second one is, Shuzon Mefares Yisrael B'Yino Amuna. That the word raya is a verb. He shepherds them with faith. Not he is a faithful shepherd. He shepherds us with faith, which means he feeds us faith in Hashem. Which means he's the one that provides us and gives us the strength to have emunah. Let's look at the next paragraph. The emunah. So the question is, why do we need that for? Don't we have emunah as part of our, isn't it inherent in the neshama of every yid, every nefesh elokis, every godly soul naturally has emunah. So he says, the emunah, sheyesh b'Yisrael mitzad atzmo, this emunah that every yid possesses naturally and inherently, because it says in Gemara, Yisrael heim maminim b'nei maminim. Yidden are believers, children are believers, which means just like children inherit traits from their parents, it's just natural. It comes with birth. Yeah, there's another Mamar here if you want. So too, we Yidden naturally inherit emunah because we have the nefesh elokis, so it comes with the package. So why do we need Moshe Rabbeinu to give us the emunah? So the answer is Ev Sheshati B'Pchinas Makif. This emunah that we have naturally, we all have it. In fact, it's something which could never be lost, but it could be B'Pchinas Makif. And Moshe Rabbeinu, Roya Mefares Yisrael, when we say that he shepherds us and he feeds us with emunah, what does he do? Shamunah ti b'pnimis, that the emunah should be b'pnimis. The emunah should be penetrate internally. So these are terms which are very common in Chassidus, makif and pnimis, and has different sort of connotations depending on what context is used. But in general, makif means, the literal word makif means surrounding or encompassing. You'll recognize it perhaps from the word hakafot. When you dance on Simchas Torah, what's hakafot? That you make a circle, dancing in a circle, something that's around. So when there's something that's there, but it's outside of me, it's not really inside, that's called makif. Pneumius means something which becomes internalized. So it's possible to have a munah, but it's makif. Now, what does that mean? What do you mean the munah is around me? It's outside of me, it's hanging in the air. So makif, we're not talking about makif in space. Outside of me means it really didn't become part of my conscious feeling and conscious thought process I'm feeling. It's something which I have, but it doesn't really connect to me. And pneumius means something which penetrates and becomes very much part of my conscious way of living. And the example that Chassidus brings is, the common example is that the Gemara says it's possible for a ganav, for a thief, to be at a process where he's about to steal money from somebody. And before he goes into the house, he prays to Hashem. And he says, Hashem, please protect me and help me that I should succeed, which doesn't make any sense. Do you believe in God? Then why are you stealing? If you don't believe in God, then why are you praying? So the answer is, he believes in Hashem, but it's makif. Which means, even though he believes in Hashem, but not to the point that it really penetrates, and therefore it doesn't change the way he conducts himself.
So that's like it surrounds him, but it's not in him?
Right. So the word surround is, again, being used figurative. Not in means it didn't really penetrate my consciousness. I'll give you an example, which we always use this example, but I think it's a good example and brings out the point. It's similar to this, but in a different way. If you ask the average frum Jew, I don't know if you were in class, we just had a class about this in level 1. If we ask the average frum Jew, do you believe that Hashem sees everything you're doing? What would be the answer? Is he lying or is it true? True. Then you ask him another question. Tell me, are there things that you do, or sometimes the way you act, that if a person or people would be watching you, you probably wouldn't do it. You'd be embarrassed to do it. Is that true?
Yeah.
Come on, let's be honest. We're all human, and there are things in the way we act or react. If somebody would be watching me, especially someone that I respect, I would not do what I do sometimes when I'm myself with my friends. So the question is, if you believe that Hashem is watching you and you really believe it truly, then how could it be if a person would be watching you, you would never do this? Hashem is watching you, you don't care to do it. How does that make sense? You should be 100 times more embarrassed to do it. Then you're going to say, oh, because you don't believe Hashem is watching me. It's not true. I believe 100% that Hashem is watching me. So what's the difference?
I believe Hashem is, what's the word I'm looking for?
Compassionate?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think that's what's going through the person's mind when they act in the way they act. That when the person's there, oh, they're going to judge me. Hashem is not going to judge me. On the contrary, Hashem is the one who, is in charge of all the reward and the punishment. And that's not what goes through the person's head. There's something else going on. Why they're able to do it, and Hashem is watching it.
Good question. There usually like there are two phrases like they say like pnimis and makifis we said, but also people say like chitzonis and pnimis, and I was always wondering what's the difference between chitzonis and makif. It's not the same because people use different words for sure.
It is the same, but in certain situations, one of these words are more suitable, and in certain situations, the other word is more suitable. Also, makif is more of a Kabbalah term, and chitzonius is just a Hebrew word, chitzonius. So makif is used sometimes for spheres, for eras, for things that usually it doesn't have that connotation. But it depends a lot on what sentence is used. Sometimes the word chitzonius, it fits in more accurately, and sometimes makif fits. But it is the same thing.
What's the translation from Hebrew?
Chitzonius means something which is outside, external. So here's an example. There's no question that this person he believes in Hashem, and he believes Hashem is watching him. He wouldn't have a problem taking his hand, put it on 12 chumashim, and swearing that Hashem is watching me. And yet, when he does something, if a person's watching him, he would be embarrassed. And if Hashem is watching him, it doesn't stop him from doing. It's the famous story in Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, before he passed, he was already on his bed, the last moments of his life, and his student said to him, Rebbe, give us a bracha. And he gave him a bracha, and he said, I bless you that your fear of God should be like the fear of people. And he said, what? That's a bracha? Our fear of God should be much more than the fear of people. So he said, no, it's a good bracha. And the reason why I'm saying it, because look, when people do something, they say, I hope nobody's watching, which means the fear of people naturally is more than the fear of Hashem. So what is the difference? So the answer is like this. Of course, we believe Hashem is watching, but this belief is not the same reality to me, like when there's a person who I can see his face and his eyes looking at me, it's a different reality. It's not as real. I don't know how to explain that, but I think everybody could relate to it. It's not the same reality like when there's a physical person standing there and watching. And that's the concept of makif. It's in my head. I agree. I acknowledge. I accept. But it didn't really penetrate to this point that it's as real as the apple on the table and as real as the eyes that are looking at me. And that's pnimis. Pnimis means when it penetrates and becomes part of my reality, just like a bagashmizdika thing. So this is what Moshe Rabbeinu accomplishes, that the Amunah should be the pnimis. That's why we use the term that he's like a shepherd that feeds us. One of the differences between food and clothing, Chassidus uses food as a metaphor for pnimius, and clothing is a metaphor for makif. Because food is something which we digest, it becomes part of my flesh and blood, and it becomes very much part of me. Clothing also has an effect on a person. It enhances the way a person looks. It enhances the impression the person gives. Clothing protect the person, but at the same time, it's not outside of the person. It's not like food that becomes part of me. And clothing, you can just change from one garment to a different garment. It's something external. So therefore, we use the term that Moshe Rabbeinu feeds us with Amunah, means he is providing us that this Amunah should become pneumius. It becomes very much part of me and very part of my reality. The difference will be if it'll affect the way I conduct myself. Like this person, if his belief in Hashem would be as real as belief of humans, he would never do something in the presence of Hashem that he wouldn't do in the presence of another person. That's a very high level of fear of God. And that was the bracha that he gave them. That your awareness of Hashem should be so real, like the awareness of another person. Not something which you pretend or you think, but it becomes your reality, just like a human being. And then your fear of God is going to be a way that it's actually going to affect your thought, speech, and action. And this is what is meant when it says in the Zohar. These are the words of Zohar, so it's Aramaic. Hahi emuna de la'ela. This supernal faith, the faith in Hashem. Hashem is speaking to Moshe, and he says to him, this faith, yidzan v'yisparnis minei al yotcha. This faith will be fed and sustained to the Yidden by you, Moshe. That's your function. And that's what it means that Moshe Rabbeinu provides us with Amunah, that we experience it consciously and we feel it in the same way, as real as we feel all the other Gashmistic things, the same reality. And then he continues in the Maimer. The fact that we say that Moshe Rabbeinu is the faithful shepherd, it's not only Moshe, but Gam Spashtusot Moshe Shebachol Der. It also refers to the offshoot of Moshe in every generation. One of the quotes from the Zohar, and there's a chapter in Tanya devoted to this. In fact, I'm thinking I might take a little bit of time off and just go through that part in Tanya. It's chapter 42, very famous chapter. But the Alter Rebbe talks about this Nakuda, this point, that the Zohar says in every generation there are souls that are an extension of Moshe Rabbeinu's souls. And these are basically the tzaddikim. And therefore, their function is similar to Moshe Rabbeinu's function. Moshe Rabbeinu teaches Torah, they teach Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu guides us, they guide us. But specifically, Moshe Rabbeinu provides us with Amunah. So these tzaddikim, they also provide us with Amunah. Moshe Rabbeinu is the provider of all the Jews of all generations, but in each individual generation, there are tzaddikim that they're the ones who provide that generation with the Amunah that they need at that time. And that's, this word in Hebrew is Pashtusa de Moshe, means the offshoot or the extension. In other words, their souls are an extension of Moshe Rabbeinu's soul. Page 36, 37. The leaders of every generation, the heads, they strengthen the Amunah of all the Yidden of their generation. What does it mean they strengthen? That the Amunah should be in a conscious way and should change the way they act, the way they live. Mordechai in the time of Purim is an example. Remember, this Maimer was said Purim Cotton, so it's about Purim. He was the extension of Moshe in his generation. He just finished saying that it's all the thousands of leaders of the tzaddikim of the generation. So the answer is it one person or is it many people? The answer is both are true. This is similar to what it says in Gemara, that every two opinions. One opinion is that every shul and every yeshiva is a miniature Beis Hamikdash. The term miniature Beis Hamikdash is found in a pasuk, in a verse in Yecheskel. And it says that even in the time of Golus, when the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, Hashem says, but you have a miniature Beis Hamikdash. And the Gemara asks, what is this miniature Beis Hamikdash? So one opinion says all the shuls and all the yeshivas in the world, each one is a miniature, is a small model of what the Beis Hamikdash is. It's the place which is the source of spiritual inspiration for the whole community. There's another opinion that says, no, it's referring to one single place. What is it? The shul of the leader of that generation. In fact, every generation it's in a different place. In this generation, the leader is in this shul, so it's this shul. In a different generation, the leader is in a different shul, so it's in a different shul. And that's the famous sikh where the Rebbe said, in our generation, it's in 770. So the Rebbe says, whenever you see two opinions, we should always make an effort to reconcile both. It's not that really arguing and there's really in conflict, but both are true, and there's a way of reconciling both opinions. So how do you reconcile both opinions? In general, each yeshiva and each shul is sort of a miniature Beis Hamikdash. And the reason is because just like the Beis Hamikdash was the source of inspiration for all the Jews in the world, so again, every shul and every yeshiva in its local community is the source of spiritual inspiration. But then there's one place which is even more openly like the Beis Hamikdash, that this is sort of the place that brings and generates spiritual inspiration to the whole world. And that one place is the shul of the Nasi of the generation. And the same here. All tzaddikim in every generation are an extension of Moshe Rabbeinu. But at the same time, there's also one tzaddik that the fact that he's an extension of Moshe Rabbeinu is so much more pronounced, so much more revealed, and so much more open, and therefore he affects the world in a much more powerful way. So who was it in that generation of Purim? It was Mordechai. In fact, it says so clearly in the Gemara, is the Gemara or the Medrash, and it says that Mordechai in his generation, it's a Medrash, was like Moshe in his generation. In other words, clearly Mordechai was the Moshe Rabbeinu of his generation.
Rabbi?
Even during this period. Gam Bisman Gzeras Haman, this period where the Yidden were being oppressed, and there were decrees coming from Haman. Shalim and Ateri Bekim mitzvahs Haya Oz Kosher Mesiras Nefesh, to learn Torah and to observe mitzvahs required Mesiras Nefesh. People had to put their life on the line. Hikil Kehilas Barabim. At that time, Mordechai showed that he's totally not intimidated by Haman, and he's not going to be moved by Haman. He gathered together Yidden publicly, L'chazik HaManasam, to strengthen their faith in Hashem, L'lamit Chazak B'limud HaTorah V'kiyum HaMitzvah, and to stand strong in Torah study and observance of mitzvahs, and not to be Chas v'Shalom afraid of Haman, or even think of Chas v'Shalom changing their faith to save their lives.
Rabbi?
So just like Moshe Rabbeinu strengthened the moon in his generation, Mordechai strengthened the moon in his generation. And the same is in every generation, there's always challenges, and there always are all sorts of difficulties coming from governments or other situations which make it hard to have Amunah. It's always the tzaddikim, and especially the Moshe Rabbeinu in that generation, that gives us the Amunah.
Rabbi Majeski?
After the previous Rebbe in his Maimer expands on this idea that number one, Moshe Rabbeinu gives us Amunah. Number two, in every generation there's someone like Moshe that gives us Amunah, strengthens our Amunah. Then he goes on to explain Diak Lashon HaKosov Shemen Kosos Lamoyer. In the pasuk, now that you have the booklets, you can all look it up. Take a look on page, I think it's 13, 14. We'll see the whole pasuk. 13.
Rabbi Majeski?
Veata Tetzave, and you should
Rabbi
command
Majeski.
Bnei Yisrael, V'yikchoi lecha, they will bring to you Shemen Zayizoch, clear, pure olive oil. Kosis Lamoyer, the olives have to be crushed to give light. Which light? For the menorah, the halas ne'atamid, to keep the lamp burning constantly. So one of the questions was, why does it say Kosis Lamoyer? It should say it's crushed to give light. Like in English, they write crushed for lighting. And the word for that is or, not mo'er. The difference between or and mo'er is or means light, mo'er means luminary, the source of the light. In other words, the sun is called mo'er. The sunlight is called the moon is mo'er. The moonlight is So it should have said, you crush the olives to give light, not to give a luminary. So here's the answer. The answer is, Shebizman HaGolus, in the time of Golus, the time of Golus, everyone is broken and crushed. The Golus crushes us. But nevertheless, through this, by going through this process, the deepest depth of the neshama is revealed, the essence of the neshama is revealed, and that's why it says mo'er. In fact, it's interesting that the word kasses, which means crushed, alludes to the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash through Golus and the second Beis Hamikdash. How's that? How many years, anyone know, how long did the first Beis Hamikdash stand? 480, 70, 50, keep going.
No, I know 410, but it's different one. It's the second one. 400.
One was 410 and one was 420. The first was 410 and the second was 420. Look at the word kosis. How much is saf? 400. Saf chav is 420. Saf yud is 410. So the word kosis, which means crushed, is also representing crushed through Golus and the destruction of the two Beis Hamikdash, and that represents Golus. So when the yid is crushed, so we know this, that in general, that when we are confronted with a challenge, confronted with something that's standing in our way, in essence, not only it doesn't weaken us, but it has the potential to bring out the deepest resources within a person, the deepest depth within a person. And in fact, ultimately, that's the reason why Hashem created the challenge. Just like Begashmias, when there's a danger, then what happens, the body releases adrenaline, and a person could do things that normally they could never do. I myself once witnessed this years ago, and I was a young child, but there was someone that's out in the mountains, in the country, and there was someone fixing his car, and he had the car lifted up on a jack. And his little daughter was playing, and she had her leg under the car, which was lifted. But then the thing snapped, and the car fell on her leg. And he ran over, he picked up the car, pulled her out, raced over to the hospital. She actually needed a cast. But I remember when he came back, he was saying, did I lift that car with my left hand? Let me try that again. He tried with both hands and he couldn't lift the car. And this is adrenaline. When a person is in danger, there's certain energy you get that you could not, people bend bars, people jump distances, do things they normally can't do. But the only thing that triggers it is the danger. There's something challenging me, something threatening me. So when Yidden are crushed in Golus and there's something threatening their connection to Hashem, the deepest depth of the neshama that comes out, that's why it's mo'er. But there's a question the Rebbe asks. And the question is that everything in Torah is precise. Everything in a mimer is precise. So the Rebbe is asking a question of the order of the mimer. First, the previous Rebbe explains that Moshe provides us with Amunah. Then he explains that not only Moshe, but every tzaddik in every generation who represents Moshe. And then he says, that's why it says that when you're crushed, you reveal the more, because by being challenged, the deepest depth of the soul comes out. And the Rebbe's question is, why in that order? In other words, I don't have to know about Moshe and the other things in order to understand this concept that when we're crushed, the deepest depth of the soul comes out. Why did he have to first explain this point and then explain the other point? And later in the Bible, it'll explain the order, why this point is sort of a prerequisite to get to the second point.
Rabbi Majeski.
In order to explain all this, we'll start now page 38, 39.
Rabbi Majeski.
Shvat Tetzave, Bo B'Maimer, Behemshich, Lamur, B'Tchilas HaMaimer. The previous Rebbe's Maimer starts with these words: V'kibel HaYehudim, Eis Asher Hechelu Lasis. This is a pasuk in the Megillah of Esther, and it means the Yidden accepted upon themselves what they began to do. So it's always helpful to see it inside. Look at page 19 in the booklet. There you have the pasuk. You have two things underlined. Look at the first one that's underlined. It says these words, V'kibel HaYehudim, and the Jews undertook to continue that which they had begun, just as Mordechai is prescribed to them. So it means they continued making this into a holiday and festivities and celebrate, but there's a deeper meaning to these words. It means that the Gemara says something incredible, that in the days of Mordechai, the Jews did tshuva. I mean, the reason why Haman made this decree wasn't just because he was a wicked person, but unfortunately in heaven it was decreed because they didn't conduct themselves properly. Yeah.
There's a question on the Jew.
Yeah,
The
no.
question on what?
On Zoom.
Hi,
What's
can
the
you
question?
hear me?
I was trying to ask him, but she said that you don't hear her. She tried to.
Oh, I didn't hear, no.
Can you hear me now?
The sound is like just, we need to make
Uh,
it.
Can you hear me?
Where's the sound?
Up, like,
On top?
no, like the button on the actual button on the actual device.
I'm so sorry. Telephones used to be easier. Oh, on top over there.
Okay. Can
We
you
hear
hear
you
me
now.
now?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Oh my gosh, Baruch Hashem. Okay, I thought I was good. Okay, thank you. Amazing.
You
Okay,
thought you
so
were
I was
still dreaming, yeah.
So my question goes back a bit, but that's fine. So I was just wondering, you know how you're saying that like Mordechai is the Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation, and how every generation has a Moshe Rabbeinu. Do the
Right.
people that are essentially the Moshe of the generation, do they know, like did the Rebbe know that he was the Moshe of the generation because he took on the title of Rebbe and took on leadership? Did he know that he was tapping into that kind of
Right.
essence?
So they know, but the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu or Mordechai and other generations is that there was certain generations where everyone knew this person is the leader. Like, when David HaMelech was king, everyone knew that he's the Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation. And Mordechai, they knew he's the Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation. And the later years of Galus, even though there always has to be someone in that position, but it's not always known. But the person himself, who is that person, knows that this is his shlichus, this is his mission. Yeah. You heard me?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So the Gemara says something incredible, that in the times of Haman, the Yidden did tshuva because there was a decree in heaven. They did tshuva. And the Gemara says their tshuva was so strong and so powerful that they accepted upon themselves to be committed to Torah, that this was sort of the culmination of Matan Torah. In other words, when they came to Har Sinai, the story of Har Sinai was 1,000 years before the story of Purim. Yidden came to Har Sinai and they accepted the Torah. So the Gemara says when they accepted the Torah, it wasn't 100% complete. In the times of Mordechai, they were so committed and they were so dedicated, and because of that, the decree was canceled. That dedication and that commitment was the culmination and the completion of acceptance of Torah. And that's what it means. They continued what they began to do. They began when they accepted the Torah at Har Sinai. When was it completed? After Har Sinai, 1,000 years later, by the time of Matan Torah. The Matan Torah in Matan Torah was just the beginning, and the times of Achashverosh, that was the completion. Al derech ma'amer Rabbeinu zechreinu levracha. This is similar to this is what it says in Chassidus, but actually in Gemara there's something similar to that on another pasuk. It's on the same page, on page 19, where it says Kimu v'kibla Yehudim. The Gemara says Kimu means they observed, v'kiblu and they accepted. Why the double language? It means they observed and they re-accepted what they began when the Torah was given. Why? Why was it incomplete? They did receive the Torah. What was wrong with that, and why did they have to re-accept? So for that, we'll have to wait for tomorrow morning. Yimir Hashem, we'll answer this question. Stay tuned.
Thank you, Rabbi Majeski.
Okay, all the best. Have a great day.
Really grateful that we have Zoom in the morning. I'm in a rush and I can't listen to all the class. I'm so happy.
What time is your flight today?
In the evening, but I'm like a leaving from Belmont at 7. I'm sorry. I will come back.
How long can you stay back?
Till Istanbul, it will be like 9.5 hours, and then from Istanbul to Kiev, it will be like 3 something hours, and from Kiev to Dnipro will be like 1 hour.
By the time you rest, it'll be time to come back.
I also think so.
Okay. Ashley, mitzvah. Have a successful trip.
I feel actually, like, when I have to have to I feel everything. Oh, okay. I have, no, really, am I the only